Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Today's webinar is about how peer reviewing can advance your career and funding and communication know-how. Today's webinar is brought to you by ReviewerCredits. ReviewerCredits is an innovative and independent platform that supports the peer review process by validating and certifying activities, providing tangible rewards to reviewers. The webinar is also brought to you by Researcher, which is a discovery tool that helps over 1.8 million scientists and academics never miss important research. It combines over 17,000 journals and preprints in one platform. And today, we actually thank the University, excuse my pronunciation, Delagi Studio de Milano Biocca. I should have asked how to pronounce that to begin with, because they are actually hosting this webinar today. We have two stellar panelists for us today. One of our speakers, Dr. Elena Cristina Rada. Elena, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi to everyone. Like Mary said, I'm Elena Cristina Rada. Actually, I work in the Insubria University, Italy, and I have 2 PhD. I work in domain of energy, environment, and also management and safety and risk. I work with, I make a review for many years, and I think I'm from the beginner that already write to ReviewerCredits in 2017, from the beginning that ReviewerCredit platform was made, because at the beginning they give us the possibility also to insert the review that we made a year before. And today I will try to give you some information how the review can help you in your life, in your academic life.
Thank you. And Dr. Alex Money, we have with us today as well from Oxford. Alex, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks very much, Mary. Hello, everyone, and hello from Oxford. Yeah, my name is Alex. I run a research program here at the University of Oxford, the Smith School of Enterprise and the Environment. My research interests are in finance, infrastructure, and sustainable development. I have around 25 years of experience. The majority of that has been outside academia, actually, in industries, in finance. I am a principal investigator on a number of projects here, which I run with various teams, and have done a fair bit of peer reviewing in my time as well. So really excited for the opportunity to participate in this webinar and looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Alex. So we'll get started. Today's webinar is how peer reviewing can advance your career. And we have 3 parts to this webinar. So the first part, we'll be discussing the connection between peer reviewing and securing funding. Is there a connection? Part 2 are the transferable skills from peer reviewing to writing successful grant applications. And part 3, what can we do to aid research commercialization, collaboration, discovery, and dissemination? So, the question today, Alex, I'm going to ask you first, is there a connection between reviewing and funding?
I mean, I think the short answer is yes. I think the longer answer is, having spent a reasonable amount of time on both sides of this equation between reviewing other people's proposals and then writing proposals myself, you're quite conscious that this is essentially, two sides of the same coin. Normally, if you're reviewing proposals from one of the research councils, for example, that we have here in the UK, or from some other grant-making body, reviewers are generally given fairly comprehensive guidance with regard to what the funder is interested in, what they're looking for, and some metrics by which you should evaluate the proposals. And I think that, I mean, what I learned quite early on is that as you go through that process of peer review, and it takes a few, I guess, to develop a momentum and a cadence about doing it, it becomes more and more clear to you, I think, what some of the core elements are in what a successful proposal looks like. And I mean, there's absolutely no question in my mind that the funding that we've been able to secure in various grants have definitely been possible because of our ability to better understand what the expectations were of the funder, and the way we understood that was in going through these various peer review processes. And it's obviously, you know, I mean, one of the advantages to peer reviewing, doing it well is a time-intensive exercise, and for academics to do it, you know, it requires taking time out of what are generally pretty busy days to invest in this exercise. But I mean, there are two things I would say around that. The first is this idea that, you know, academia is all about standing on the shoulders of giants, and this idea that actually we're trying to contribute incrementally to the academy. And so there's a sense of a responsibility and obligation and a privilege, I think, to be able to review other people's work and you know, be excited about other work that's happening and try to strengthen and support proposals through the peer review process. So I think there's this broader objective, and that is a really good thing to do, and an important thing to do. But then in a narrower, more self-serving way, you know, just to be honest about it, it's also a really important thing to do to understand the craft of what a good proposal looks like, how to write it, how to learn from how other people write, and how to bring that into your own approach, not just in the mechanics of writing, but in the way you articulate an idea or a vision. You know what to simplify and when, you know what to expand in detail. You know, and that is an art more than a science generally, but actually doing it systematically through peer review gives some scientific basis to that approach. So that's the longer answer, Mary. Thank you.
That makes total sense. Thank you, Alex. And Elena, do you have
Yeah, I think we can say that between the peer review and the funding, there is like a bridge. One doesn't work without another, because when you make a peer review, you are always updated. You know what is new in your area or in the areas that you are working. And also, this is connected with the funding, because if someone already proposed something that is new, so already you can know what is the amount of money that you need to develop that things. So for me, it's win-win to make both.
Okay, thank you. The second question is, does securing grant funding actually differ across academic disciplines? Alex, would you like to take that one?
Sure. I mean, I think absolutely it does. So it depends. It depends again in what, you know. So grant funding here could be a very broad range of things. From and forgive me because I talk about this principally from a UK perspective, because that's where I've done most of my fundraising and grant writing. But within grant funding, the different research councils, whether they focus on social sciences, humanities, physical sciences, biology, and so forth, they will all have different criteria for how they expect the grants to be written, where they expect the emphasis to be placed. So I think there will always be substantive content differences not driven necessarily by the discipline itself, but by the funder and the nature of what the funder's motivations are and whatever disciplinary emphasis that funder has. But I think with that said, there's an incredibly high level of commonality in winning proposals, right? So the proposals that tend to get funded all tend to share certain quite common traits, irrespective of the discipline for which they come from, or even the funders, the funders' profile and background. And so it's important to write to the grant, right, to address the specifics of what that grant is looking for. But actually, in my experience, and my level of interdisciplinarity is limited, I have to say. I mean, we work across, I work across energy and water and food systems and finance and so forth, but I don't do atmospheric physics, for example. So I'm only speaking within that spectrum. There's much more similarity in what a good proposal looks like than there is difference in my experience. Mary.
Okay, thank you. Elena, did you want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, I think there is a little difference regarding the funding, because if you go to the area where you need to construct a pilot plant, is different from an area from the, I don't know, if you compare the science area with the one of, I don't know, philosophy. In philosophy, you will have to search without constructing something pilot. So even if when you write all the material, maybe they have the same structure. So first you write something like an introduction, seeing what is new, what it already exists, what doesn't exist. When you arrive to the funding, I think this is the difference between the discipline from my point of view. What I saw making also review and also writing this one. But it's my experience.
Okay, thank you. The next question, Alex, I think you've already touched upon that there isn't really a one-size-fits-all formula. It's about you actually fitting into the funding that's available, so making your proposal explicit to that funding. But can you sort of touch upon what you think actually makes a successful grant application in this case?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think this is a good question. The institution that you are, different applications will involve different structures where you may be writing it as the principal investigator, but you have co-investigators who are from other institutions, and so you need to so that's a different complexity to think about. But just in terms of thinking about it from the primary investigator institution, I mean, absolutely, the nature of the institution that you're in or you represent should be really significant in how you write in terms of putting the strongest application you can. So I'm at a research intensive university here, and also a university that tends to have quite good convening power, and so we would emphasize those capabilities in much of the work that we propose that we can lead with. Much of my own work is in sustainable development, and I have a particular interest in sub-Saharan Africa. And so in many grants that I am looking to write, I'm looking very, very much for institutional collaborators at universities in other parts of the world, where the reason we want to collaborate with them may be less about their convening power, but more because they have a really good understanding of specific empirical factors that are important to the research, or have a network that is important, and so on. And so in structuring a successful funding application, I think the relative institutional strength is super important. Being able to identify what is the differentiator that your institution has relative to others that might be applying, and kind of doubling down on making that point really clearly in the application. is really important. And hand in hand with that is recognizing intrinsic weaknesses that the institution may have as well. So so we sit here and we have a fairly sort of Oxford-centric view of the world, if in many cases, and is really important, I think, in making a broader application. That so funders, European funders, for example, will expect to see us working outside Oxford with other European universities, other universities in the UK, for example. Funders who are looking to work on a developing country project would expect to see meaningful collaboration. Not just listing an institution for the sake of covering the bases, but actually evidencing the benefits to the funding application of that collaboration. And a lot of my time is spent in trying really hard to build those relationships and to do good work, to try to do stuff that has a benefit to all those different parties involved in that. So I think it's absolutely right that the institutional attributes are really, really important and should be emphasized. Focus on the strengths in preparing these applications. Mary.
You touched upon the mechanics of writing earlier. Do you think that this is a particular skill that you can learn with experience, or does that have to come from your PI or your mentor and whoever's actually helping you make the grant application proposal, putting the proposal together? Elena, did you want to take that one?
First, I want to answer a little to the other question, because I think the situation in UK is different from Italy. For example, from my experience, I think that the best solution is to be free to propose a research for external without a filter at the structural level. Because in Italy, I think in all Italy, not only where I work, we had some cases where there were many proposals at university level, but for each department, they say you can propose only, I don't know, X number. And this is a little risky, because maybe, well, for example, if for each department we have 3 proposals, 5 proposals, how you choose which is the best? Because you have, when you make this competition and you ask to the national one to peer review, this will make the time very, very long. And maybe in this time, the other proposal from the other country gain and go ahead of you. This was my experiences, because we had problem with this fixed number. Regarding the how you can write the application, how you apply, I think if you first read very carefully what is requested, you can write it. Of course, when you make an application for a grant for something, this means that you already published papers, so you know how to construct a document in a way that could be peer-reviewed, and the people that will review will understand what we want.
Okay, thank you for that. So do either of you have any hints and tips for early career researchers in what makes a successful grant application?
I think, first of all, you have to have the help of some university offices, because you can make a good application, but when you have to decide the funding, when you have to decide which people will collaborate with you, you need to know the amount of money, for example, to put for each line. And this is not easy to decide, and you don't know what are the taxes, what are the amount that you can use for one or for another. Because generally, when you apply for a grant, they give you information, not very detailed. So maybe when someone applies for the first time, it's better to speak before with someone else that already applied.
Okay, thank you. And Alex, did you have any hints or tips?
Well, I agree, of course, with Elena that I think it's important to it really helps if you have institutional support around you, with people who are familiar with the grant application process and how you manage things like overheads and full economic costs and all these jargonistic ideas that come up in getting research funded. But I mean, taking the question to assume that maybe people don't always have those things available. I mean, there's a couple of other things, So we are in a situation where it's like a bit of a pyramid. We have a lot of very, very good early career researchers, and then not that many experienced people who can be principal investigators. And so for early career researchers who want to get funded and to be part of longer term projects, there's obviously quite a lot of pressure on them to try to find applications that can get the support of a PI, because the PI capacity is quite limited. So a sort of hint and tip for me is in any context, if you're interested in a grant, early career researcher, do the work early on that makes the opportunity attractive and interesting to who you want to have supporting you in these applications. So there's two parts to that. It's to understand what you think the proposal should focus on, and then matching that to the interests of a prospective PI for whom it's not going to be a really big ask, right, in terms of something completely new or something completely different. And actually, that matching process is a really important thing. And if you practice it, it's also something that even if in your own university you might not have a perfect fit for, you may be in a position to go to a PI based somewhere else and say, look, I'm really interested in doing this. I think you would be a really good fit, or however it works as PI. Would you be interested in some sort of collaboration? And I've seen these examples of, every now and again we get these as well, where an early career researcher has a really clear idea of what they want to do. Maybe they've got access to good data or a good network or something else. They haven't got what they need in terms of a PI to help push this thing through, and it makes sense. It makes sense for us to try to do something. So my main hint and tip is to be, if you're early career researcher and you're missing something in terms of what you need to put a good application together, focus on those two things. Focus on the clarity and significance of the proposal, of what you're proposing to do, and match very carefully with the potential principal investigator who you need to help, to help put that application together. If you get those two things right, the chances of putting a successful application in that goes all the way to getting funded, just goes up dramatically. Mary.
Thanks for that. That was really helpful. So I think we'll move on to part 2 now in the interest of time. And this is all about transferable skills. So we've talked a little bit about this already. Obviously, there are a number of key skills that you need to be a good peer reviewer. And I'd like, Alex, if you could touch upon what you think makes a good peer reviewer.
Okay, so yeah, that's a good broad question. Again, lots of things. I think the key things are fairly obvious. You need to have some attention to details. You need to be able to read these applications, give them the time, give them the care to be able to understand them. It helps to be able to calibrate it. So if you're getting several applications to review, it's to have consistency in the approach that you apply in comparing one over the other. This is often the hardest thing to learn as a peer reviewer, because the proposals will be different, right? And you've got to create some sense of equivalence in terms of assessing them and giving a comparable feedback. So some ability to understand how to calibrate attention to detail, finding the time that is necessary to do a decent job, and then also some good communication skills of your own in how you synthesize your thoughts and comments about the proposal in a way that's useful to the funder, so that they can take what you've given them and do things with it.
Okay, thank you. And Elena, did you want to comment on this?
First of all, to make a good peer review is that the people that will make the peer review have to have an integrated vision, because you receive sometimes more grants to review, more application, but there, even for example, if the section is energy, they will be very different. So if the person that makes the peer review don't have a overall vision, will be very difficult to make a right review, and not to give more for one and a little for another one. And have to balance all the parts of the proposals. And also, I think it's important to search and to understand who are the proposals, what they have done until that moment, and what they can improve with the proposal that you receive to peer review. And I think when you have more, you have to make the review first time, and I make like this: leave 1 or 2 days, put on the paper all the score, and after these days, watch again all in order to see if the first impression that you have is the same, remain the same. Because sometimes, I don't know, today I like more this one and tomorrow another one.
Thank you, that's excellent. So the key skills needed to be a successful peer review. You've mentioned calibration, you've mentioned key communication skills, the ability to balance, you know, to take time out as well, but like you said, Elena, to review and come back to something. But presumably, sort of the question for me is, are these skills exclusive to peer reviewing? Or essentially, are you building upon skills that you have learned when you've been conducting your PhD?
I think generally who make a proposal already made a PhD.
Yeah.
So already knows to do. Maybe for the PhD it's very useful to make a review of papers, so they understand how to write a paper and how can review. Because during the PhD, generally each student prepare 1 or more papers to be published. And in order to understand how to write, what you have to do, if you make peer review, this helps a lot. Because there are some analogies, you can understand how the structure, the proposals, I think helps. From my point of view, helps.
Okay, and Alex, did you want to comment on that? Obviously, we're talking about, are the skills exclusive to peer reviewing, or are they skills that you have learned elsewhere during sort of the education period or whatever?
I mean, I think there are. I mean, there are some generic skills which are of course relevant. So all these things we've spoken about, you know, attention to detail, finding the time, doing it carefully, and so forth, are definitely skills that one would expect to have built, through any advanced research, such as a PhD. There are specific things around peer reviewing. So I mean, we've talked here a bit, I suppose. There's peer reviewing for grant applications, which is one thing. Peer reviewing for journals, which is which is something a little bit different. I suppose it's worth just thinking about the distinction there. But if you think about peer reviewing for grant applications, for example, it's really there's a responsibility that sits with you, right? Which is to do the right to make the right decisions, right? Because you know how much this matters to other people. So I think there are some quite specific skills where you have that responsibility, which is quite different to the sort of technical skills you would kind of develop in other forms of advanced research. So that's what I'd say there. But if I can just take the next bullet and just blend that in, I think in the application of these skills to successful grant applications, if you understand this question of the response. So again, thinking specifically about peer reviewing grant applications, if you understand the sense of the responsibility that you have, it also, I think, really helps you focus when you're writing to be able to communicate the value of the work that you propose to do in that research. Because if that piece can come across, then the reviewer can understand what's at stake here and why it matters, and then of course is the post-qualification stuff of can you do it? Do you have the right the right people and so on. But it all starts with having a proposal that is important enough that you care enough about, and you can communicate that such that the person reading it can share that sense of its importance. Its importance in absolute terms, but more specifically, its importance to you in writing that proposal. So I think that there's some complementarity there between those two questions.
I think also there are some points that an applicant has to know and to try to write very well. For example, they have to present something that is original, because not always we find new things. The applicant, I think, also has to understand very well the instruction of the call and answer and try to write the proposal, answering in detail to each point. I think the applicant first have to design, for example, in his mind, the proposals, think to the proposal, and then begin to write it. Have also to demonstrate that he optimized the prices, the cost for all the things that he need in the proposal. And also, I think sometimes has to put also win a grant, but you have also to demonstrate that what you have made is important. And I think also in the proposal have to write something about the dissemination.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is, does peer reviewing open doors? Alex, would you like to take that one?
I mean, I don't know if I do want. I don't know if I do want to take that. I'm curious. I'm curious, I suppose, as to what that question means. I think. I don't think it does. I suppose I don't think it does. If it means does it open doors in that it is a way to generate favor with a potential grant funder, so that if you scratch their back, they might scratch yours. If it means it like that, I don't really think it does, because
I think it's more in terms of, I think, collaboration and building a network around you. I think that's more what's implied about.
At the peer review, generally it's a no for the applicant, so you cannot contact the other ones. So I think no, but
okay.
I mean, where peer reviewing may open doors is I mean, Elena's right. Then these are normally blind or double blind, But what it might do is it may socialize you to, you know, areas of research that you otherwise didn't have much exposure to. And as I think as was said earlier in the call, it may bring you up to speed and update you with current practices in other areas. So it might open doors in the sense of helping you access information or knowledge that otherwise you may not have seen. But I wouldn't over stress that point, because I mean generally, you know, research that's any good is disseminated and people find the stuff out. I don't think you need to be involved in the peer review process to get some sort of special access to that stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on from that, how can peer reviewing help to raise your profile in the academic community?
Sorry, go ahead, Elena.
I can speak from Italian point of view, because if we speak about peer reviewing in journals, in Italy, if you have a document, a certification that attests that you make that peer review for that journal, and you can gain points when you apply for something. And this depends also a lot, the number of points depends also a lot of the impact factor of the journal that you make peer review. But I think this is only for Italy. It's a national request, something like this. I don't know in the other countries. I know also in Romania, because I work a lot with them, that they are considering these things. But I don't know in other European countries.
Okay, Alex, did you want to comment?
I mean, yeah. So I mean, the interesting thing is obviously reviewers tend to review anonymously. So in a way, the act of reviewing itself may not necessarily raise your profile. But for most journals, you know, most journals will have an editorial committee and such like, and by systematically reviewing for a journal, I mean, what often happens is that you're then invited to be part of that committee, and that obviously gives profile. And you know, the more prestigious the journal, obviously, the more that profile may be valued. You know, it's interesting. You know, peer reviewing is one of those last bastions of industry, which is a lot of work for no money or very little money in most cases.
Absolutely.
And that model, I think most of us recognize. Well, I think that is a problematic model for lots of reasons, and I think that's become more and more reflected in where the industry has gone with publishing and so forth. But I think one of the intangible benefits, if you like, the non-monetary benefits of doing peer reviewing is exactly for this reason. It's to help build, particularly for earlier career researchers, is to be able to help to build their profile in ways that, you know, ultimately are helpful for their careers. I'm not a fan of that, particularly as a reason to do it. I think it feels to me there should be a more equitable way to make. You shouldn't have to be expected to in this day to give up, you know, a large amount of free labor just for the basis of getting profile and recognition, because it's a fundamentally inequitable setup, right? There may be people who can afford that time, and other people that can't afford that time. So I think it bakes into it certain biases which I don't think are particularly attractive. And if you look across at the composition of editorial boards in many journals, you know that bias is kind of reflected in large part there, I think, in terms of who does the work and so forth. So I think it triggers some broader questions, maybe slightly outside the scope of what this panel is for. But
definitely.
In the narrowest sense, does it help you raise your profile? Yeah, absolutely, it can do. And some people do it very strategically and very successfully.
Can I say something? I think working in an university, working in a research area, making review and peer review, it's part of our work. even if you have or don't have time, I understand like this. I don't know the others or how you think.
No, absolutely. It's part of giving back, isn't it? So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
To help the others, the beginners.
Definitely. So I went to a conference a couple of years ago, and it was all about peer review. And obviously, we were talking about blind and double blind peer review earlier. But I'm just throwing this red herring into just a quick yes/no answer. Do you think the future of peer review is open?
Yes and no. Will be nice to be open, but this means that when you are not agree with the proposals, you will not be friend with a lot of people. So it's better blind from my point of view.
Alex?
Yeah, I respectfully disagree. I just don't. I don't think that in the long term that makes, that's the ideal situation. I think people can and should be transparent and can recognize that this is just part of the process, right? You do work, you will get you'll get responses to it. This issue of, I think Elena is right. The reality is that it is personalized and politicized to a certain extent, but actually people can be much more acerbic and in their writing, in their attributed responses to journal articles. You'll often see some really aggressive responses to papers. I know I've seen a few on my own side. So I don't think that reason about worrying about being popular or not or whatever is a good reason for it not to. I think the only way everyone is moving towards more transparent structures in terms of research dissemination, in terms of access, and it's just a natural extension of that increased transparency that the review process becomes open, in my view.
Okay, thank you. And last question on this part is, are we doing enough to reward peer reviewers? I mean, obviously they give up their time, and it's intensive, and they have to put a lot of work into reviewing proposals. Is there any way? Obviously we have reviewer credits, so hopefully Elena will chime in with that, but are there other ways that we should be rewarding peer reviewers for what they do?
I think also here depends, because if you make a peer review for an European or I don't know, international, national grant, you are paid. If you make for journals, depends. Some of them will pay you, some of them will give you credits that you can use it in order to have one of your paper open access published. Depends. I think depends from a country to another. And like I said before, working in a research in university or I don't know, in other firm, make a review, it's how you know the news. And I think it's part of your job. You have to do it. I like it, for example. I don't know the others.
We actually have a question from the chat, and it's the question around, as an early career researcher seeking funding for research in his or her area, where could he or she find the necessary information on funding programs? Alex, do you have any hints or tips around that?
Well, it's the $1 million, $1 billion. I don't know what is the big question. Where's the fund? The answer is it's a slightly complicated answer. Certain funders will have very specific criteria about what they will fund, what institutions they will fund, and on what basis they will fund them. And so there isn't. I don't think there is a. There isn't a silver bullet through that. Again, in the UK, there are centralized databases. UKRI and others will collate across the different research councils and possibly other funding sources. You guys probably know, you guys probably know other places where you can get this information.
Yeah, a lot of a lot of publisher websites actually have details of funding as well, and places like Digital Science will have all funding that's available. So there are other areas where you can actually go. We can put some details in the slides afterwards if that's useful for people.
Maybe if that person is connected with the university, generally there is an office for the grants, so can ask and we'll have all the answer with the grants that are opened in Italy. There are also countries, for example, in Romania, that they created an institution only for the European grants. So you can enter in their website and you find all that opened. Depends.
Thanks, Elena, for that. So we'll move on to part 3 now. This sort of veers away a little from the discussion, but in terms of, applying for grant applications and having a societal sort of impact. I know that proposals that are out there, they've been asked more and more to sort of stress the social or cultural benefits of their research or the economic benefits. So I just want to talk a little bit about knowledge exchange and the role of universities, the role of the publisher, and utilising networks in general in the academic community. So Alex, did you want to start us off? So what do you think are the opportunities, or what opportunities exist to support researchers' knowledge exchange?
Let me talk about this in the very narrow sense of the little that I know, because I think this is a really good question, but it's probably difficult to overgeneralize the answer. So if we're writing, for example, in the area of sustainable development, for example, and we're looking at the 2030 global goals and the agenda. And actually, what one is trying to do is produce research, produce knowledge, and then have people interact with that knowledge and engage it and apply it, and have these sort of positive feedback loops in terms of where projects and interventions are being run and developed. Information that comes back from that can be empiricized, and knowledge can be derived and processed and generated from that. There are often these sort of cyclical relationships that have some direct benefit between knowledge exchange driven by universities or researchers who are trying to promote and push the theory building. I mean, the role of the publisher can depend a little bit in terms of what their objectives are, but the utilization of the networks is exactly what gives this thing its sort of organic energy, right? It's there's sort of feedback response loops that are really important to that. So I mean, if the question is what we can do to aid it, I think, I mean, this is context specific, right? So it depends what the research is, what the objectives are, and all of that stuff. So I think so I don't want to generalize, but I think in many cases where research is being put out there that advance quite specific objectives, then thinking through the networks around that, which will reinforce it and allow work to build off that, is absolutely key to it. And my experience is that publishers are, broadly speaking, supportive of this. I mean, you need to find people to help you, but you can often use publishers and publisher networks to help strengthen the network or the collaboration loops that you want to have in place to make sure that the value of the work that you're interested in is sustained and strengthened. So that's my half answer to that. Yeah.
Can I just ask you, more often than not, publishers like to see themselves as a community hub as well, so bringing academics together and providing resources for a community of academics. Do you think that should be the role of the publisher, or do you think there should be other ways that academics can, better support each other and collaborate with each other? I know they've got ResearchGate, etc., but do you think that is the role of the publisher, or do you think that should be done elsewhere, and if so, by whom?
I mean, I think that many publishers are trying to reposition themselves in what is a rapidly changing landscape. And if one of the things that publishers feel they can do is bring value as a convener and as a network, I'm all for that. I mean, why not? We've got a big paper. Well, we hope there's a big paper coming out in a couple of weeks, and I'm really hoping that the publisher can help us with the dissemination and all sorts of things around that. And as an academic, that's all to the good. I don't think there are either or binaries here. I see no reason why one can't have an academic peer network and then use the resources of. So my university has its own media relations people and all sorts of other people. So we would use those channels. But yeah, absolutely. I think the publishers are in many cases trying to define and redefine their roles in a changing environment. And if part of what they do is bring value to that dissemination bit, more power to them. There seems to me little reason not to do that. The only thing I would say, and I'm really sorry to go back, but this just goes back to that last question about rewarding researchers and so on. The only thing that I am increasingly concerned about is this question of equity, right? And I think that Elena's right. It's part of our job to do it, and we're sort of, in a way, it's baked into what we're paid to do, is to do some of that. But in many other places they're not, right? And there is no capacity to do that. And I think there risks to be a Western-centric or Anglo-centric perspective on what people should be doing as part of this work. But if it excludes peer review that comes from other parts of the world, or in these publisher-driven collaboration networks, they're again kind of speaking to just a subset of the networks that we should be engaging in. I think that is a real challenge that we currently face, actually.
Okay.
But I think also some publishers already fought to this aspect, because some of them, for example, propose special issues, and with this they help to turn the light on the specific research or on specific discoveries. And other also give the possibility to choose a paper to be more published than the others. I think there are good things that the publisher do and helps the academic.
Okay, thank you. I just want to get a quick question in. Somebody's asking about how important is it to promote oneself to actually secure funding. So I thought I'd get that in before, because I know I'm quite conscious that we're running out of time. But if you could answer that, Elena, what do you think? It ties into the sort of the next couple of questions that we're going to be asked anyway.
What did the person intend to promote himself? Because, like I said before, when you apply for a grant, when you write the proposal, first of all, you have to understand what you have to do, and you have to have help from the other that already make proposal, that already win some proposals. So we'll give the new researcher, the new applicant, a lot of information, will help him. I didn't really understand the questions. How to promote what?
Yeah, no, I think it's about self-promotion, and we're coming on to that in a minute. So it's about self-promotion in terms of, what you can do yourself.
Okay.
To promote your research, etc.
The tools that are today, or the internet, or I don't know, ResearchGate, ReviewerCredits, or this kind of platforms helps a lot, because on this platform you can write, you can, for example, if you are preparing a grant, you can put the questions for example, on the ResearchGate and say what the other people think about your idea without saying that you are preparing. Maybe they will give you some other information. Another way to promote yourself, I think, is also when you go to the conferences or to the seminars, try to explain better what you are doing, and also try to connect with the people that make similar things that you are doing. This will help to promote you and also help to have a connection with the people that can help you in the future. In Italy and also in other European countries, helps a lot also to use the Hirsch Index that was made by Scopus database and by Web of Science. Also because put together people that have similar numbers and that could help themselves to be more viewed in the internet, in the things that they are doing. However, I think the best way to promote you is to connect with other people and use all the internet tools that are, or the databases, or the things that are available today.
Okay, thank you, Elena. And Alex, did you want to touch upon self-promotion, the role of social media, measuring the impact of research, etc., and perhaps tie it in with the economic goals, the social and cultural benefits, etc.
Thank you. I mean, I think Elena spoke really well about the self-promotion and the social media piece. So I don't have much to add on that. But if I can maybe just help to bring in these last two bits on your sheet in relation to that. I think it's worth being clear to yourself as to what the specific objectives are in promotion. You may want to promote the research, promote yourself in terms of your career profile, to promote your opportunities to get funded. Those things may sound like the same thing, but actually the specific ways in which you spend your time, because it's effort, right, in communicating and outreaching are slightly different. So I think we find communications such as writing short form articles and blogs, which are highlighted on the sheet here, are really effective ways to target very specific types of things. So we wrote, I wrote a piece on blended finance a little while ago for the water sector, and through that we ended up doing some quite good work with the World Water Council and with the Council of Ministers and so on. But the way we got there was by positional statements about either highlighting an abstract of work that we had out there, or in floating a kite, flying a kite. This is the sort of work we'd be keen to do. This is why we think it's important. Here's a short piece to explain that in a straightforward way, and see if that attracts the attention of a funder or something like that. So there are really quite strategic, these are tactical tools, blogs, so they're actually very strategic ways in which they can be used. And if you're clear at the outset as to what you're trying to do with that medium of communication or engagement, you can really improve its effectiveness in delivering whatever it is that you're trying to get. And the amazing thing, they're such democratic tools, right? You can be anybody, anywhere, at any stage of your career, and have access to to Medium or any of these things. So it's a really good way for anybody trying to get something done to get involved, I think.
Brilliant, thank you. In the interest of time, I know we've run over slightly, so I just had one final question that's come in from the panel, from the audience. Is some believe the issue of rewarding in peer review and funding in general is unbalanced? It could sound like a pyramid scheme. What is your opinion?
Well, I mean, I think as I have some sympathy with that. I have some sympathy with the argument of lots of unpaid reviewers supporting a business model where publishers where publishers are the sort of end beneficiaries of that. But I do think that model, or how that model used to be, looks like it's fundamentally changing, and I hope that in the course of that there is some rebalancing as we move to more open access, a clearer recognition of the value that peer reviewers bring, a move away from the implicit assumption that everyone's got time and has been paid and is resourced to do peer reviewing, which may be true for me and for Elena, but it's certainly not true for academics in many other universities. I think as transparency and awareness of that increases, there should, I think, in time be a rebalancing. I'm really positive, by the way. I think there's lots of trends happening in the sector and in how publishing is going that is ultimately going to be very positive for academics and researchers and for the quality of research that we see coming out.
Thank you, Alex. And Elena, did you have any final thoughts?
Not.
Or any takeaways you'd like to give our listeners?
No, I think I can say something about another way to promote, maybe like the things that you wrote in the last question, to try to find some way to either to publish some short parts of the research, but this might maybe give problem after if you want to publish an entire paper, because you can, after saying that you have plagiated yourself, I don't know, it's a little tricky. But I think the best is maybe the poster.
Okay, that's a good one.
You can use it. So after you can enlarge the things and publish without problems. This was like
definitely a good one. Thank you for that. Alex, did you have one final takeaway for our listeners?
Well, I mean, a final takeaway is no matter where you are and whatever stage of the career you're at, I mean, this is a really exciting time to be in research and be publishing and to be trying to get projects funded. God knows we've got enough challenges that need good work to be done. We're probably entering a period in the economy where there will be funding available to try and advance solutions and to think ways through to get us onto the other side. So my takeaway view is, look, to be positive, to be strategic, to think about what you're trying to do, and then use these very many democratic channels that are available to all of us to move things forward and to make progress in what you're trying to get done. It's a good time to be a researcher, in my view, even if it's a challenging time in many other ways.
Absolutely, and I think we all need a bit of tenacity and resilience. So, thank you both so much for your time today. It's been really interesting, and I hope to everybody listening, it's been a benefit to you. And the recording will be distributed afterwards, and obviously you can have slides too if that would help. So thanks both. Thanks, Elena. Thanks, Alex, so much, and have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks. Bye.